Welcome to Legal Tech Live. This is the podcast covering the people, products, and platforms transforming the legal industry. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain, founder of Legal Tech Live.
And I'm Hannah Zuma, our in-house marketing expert. Every week, we'll bring you unfiltered conversations with the founders, builders, and innovators in the legal technology sector.
This is the show for those interested in growing their businesses and improving the legal world.
And the founders and operators looking to learn from others.
So if that sounds like you, join us and stay tuned for the following episode. Our guest today is Cheyenne Moseley. She is the Legal Operations Director at Rasa, also known as Rasa Legal, because there are a couple of Rasas out there, but this is the legal technology Rasa. Cheyenne, welcome to Legal Tech Live. We are happy to have you. We want to get a little origin story of Cheyenne because you came highly recommended from somebody I respect a great deal, your CEO and founder, Noella Sudbury. Some of our purpose in reactivating the podcast was to get to people who are a little bit more behind the scenes in legal tech. And so you've got a really interesting story as an operator and a legal operator, and you have a long history in legal tech from LegalZoom to Rasa. And can you give us, a little bit of your background and how you got into legal tech and your kind of origin story from the business formation company and the kind of legal software as a service company into more of a mission-driven role?
Absolutely. So my journey with LegalZoom started really immediately after I graduated from college, right? I went into it thinking that I was going to be an attorney. And LegalZoom, I was going to use LegalZoom and the experience at LegalZoom as kind of like the stepping stone to like that legal career I eventually wanted. The funny thing, I started at LegalZoom and I actually started in a customer service role. So I applied for a legal document specialist, and they were the individuals responsible for actually preparing the documentation that you submit to the state to create your business entity. So I applied for that role, ended up with a customer service role because that position was just filled at the time. And at that time, I was married. We had 2 kids, fresh out of college, and like, we need a job. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to figure it out. So started out in customer service, stayed in that role for about a year, learned the processes around, business formations. And eventually I was promoted to the manager of the business formation team. And then I was managing one team, specifically the business formation. So we'll prepare the documentation, submit to the state. And then I was promoted again to become the general business manager. So the end-to-end process. And then eventually, within about, I would say 10 years, I was eventually promoted to director of the entire division. And very similar to Rasa, I started out with LegalZoom when it was very much a startup. I believe when I came on board, I was 4 years old. So things were still very manual for us. I mean, manual to the point where we were managing files in manila folders. Like, we'll have a section in the back with like stacks of manila folders. Like, we didn't have much automation at all. There were humans that will spend half the day actually doing the processing part. And then at the end of the day, actually packaging and getting, everything sent out to the clients. I mean, we even had like the president of the company, the founders packaging UPS documents to get them shipped out to the customers. So that's how small we were. So it was a great experience just being able to grow up in the company and just watching the company grow as a business. Again, we started out very, very small. And then, as we began to scale, we had to figure out ways to automate, so we could no longer manage customer files with manila folders. We had to figure out a way to do this with a workflow system. So I just remember the first time we introduced the first workflow system, and it was met with immediate backlash. People are so afraid of technology. It's never going to do it right. It's never going to be able to catch these issues. And, my job is going to go away. Why are you doing this? But we absolutely needed it. We were getting so much volume at the time, and the work was just literally piling up in folders, and it was difficult to move the files from team to team. So, bringing in that workflow management system and being able to kind of move things electronically, it did help a ton. So we went from one workflow system, and at that time we were using something called FileNet. And I don't know if you guys have heard of that before, but it was like an IBM
I
product.
have, but it's been a long time. I
Yeah,
wasn't in that. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've heard that phrase
yeah,
or
yeah,
that
yeah.
name.
Yeah, and I think that was probably in 2007 when we brought that on board. So it was just brand new, but it helped tremendously. And then eventually went from FileNet to like a Salesforce. So like as the company kind of grew up, the technology grew up as well because we had to manage different caseloads, we had to manage different customers. We moved into different types of business formation. We went from just being a business formation to registered agent to virtual mail to all these different, lines of business. So we needed something that can really grow with us. It's been a great journey. I eventually moved on from the business formation department. At that time, LegalZoom was trying to figure out a way to offer legal services. And at that time, public companies could not own a law firm. So we were trying to
Right.
figure out a way around this where we can kind of hire attorneys. So what we did, LegalZoom actually purchased a law firm in the UK. I don't know if you guys remember that, LegalZoom UK. And did you want to ask a question?
I no, I vaguely remember that, but I want you to continue down this road because I think there's some questions in here, but please
Yeah,
continue.
yeah, for sure. And so we bought a law firm in the UK and then we hired attorneys, but they actually work for the UK firm, even though they were stationed in the States. And so all the legal work would flow through that UK law firm. So that provided the platform and the compliance that allowed us to actually provide legal services. So there was a point in time where the company really wanted to expand that part of the business. So I moved from the business formation parts. And at that point in time, I probably have been with that division for about 14 years.
Yeah.
And I moved over to like the law firm side, because the goal was to kind of help them build out the operations for that part of the business as well. So it was an interesting journey because we were a startup within a large company. Because we were operating as a law firm, everything had to remain separate from the main business. So separate workflow, separate tools, the way we manage our clients, everything was completely separate. Again, very manual. You're trying to figure out how to, automate things. And it was pretty fun. It was just very, very interesting being a startup within a larger company. And in that time, let me see, we had a change in leadership. That's when Dan kind of came in and he decided to move in a different direction. And also around that time is when the ABS law came into effect. So then we were able to kind of wind down the UK firm and actually open up the ABS. So we brought that law firm business back to the States.
Yeah.
And
For our listeners who, I mean, I'm aware of it, Hannah may need to know a little. ABS
Yeah, I was just about to
is an
ask.
alternative business structure,
Mhm.
which Cheyenne, can you elaborate on what that exactly means here in the U.S.?
So essentially, it's a business entity that allows non-lawyers who have an economic interest, kind of like in law, to make money in the authority of a law firm, if that makes sense. So for example, with LegalZone, we had something called LegalZone Legal Services. So that was our law firm. So that was the entity in which we provided our legal services. And that that LegalZone Legal Services was owned or is owned by LegalZone, the actual corporate entity, which is completely separate from the actual law firm part of the business. So through the ABS, LegalZoom was able to own a law firm. And through that law firm, we're able to conduct legal work while being in compliance. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. So, and from my understanding of the ABS rules, and for example, Hana, Arizona, where you're located,
Hmm.
actually does this, where the business people can own part of the law firm as well as the lawyers. Now, you would have to do all, let's assume that your dad opened an Arizona law firm. He'd have to do all the legal work, but you could do all the back office work, all the marketing
Hmm.
work, all those things. And then that allows you to make money off of the legal services, which was always an issue for lawyers, is that other people could not get paid legal
Hmm.
fees. So this is like if you're, which is funny because you still have to pay people who work for you, but that's
Right.
basically, you couldn't share legal fees with people. And that
Hmm.
is essentially what happens in this ABS structure is, well, you get to do all the other business aspects and the lawyer just gets to do the legal work.
Exactly.
And so you are kind of sharing in the income that comes from doing that legal work. Is that a pretty good
Got it. Okay.
summation, Cheyenne,
I
for
think that is
for
excellent.
okay.
Yes.
All right. So
Thank you.
so you guys did this, and quite successfully, and you were leaders in this space at LegalZoom. So I do want to pivot a little bit into the legal operations, because you went from business formation operation stuff
Mhm.
to director of or into legal operations. Now, I've always done startup and small businesses and that type of thing, and that's where HANA comes from. But legal operations, can you define that kind of broadly for us? Because this is, I define it as the legal side of business operations, but it's really, I mean, that's pretty simplistic. So maybe you can kind of give us an idea what you did in legal operations, what you do in legal operations,
Yeah,
and for our audience as well.
sure. I would say legal operations is operations essentially in a legal setting. I know that's super basic, but I mean, it makes sense, right? Because when you're thinking about operations in the traditional sense, you're thinking about things like throughput, you're thinking about, cost per unit, you're thinking about how to make things more efficient, you're thinking about how to, client satisfaction and things like that. Within legal operations, you're also thinking about that, but you have to take into consideration the nuances of managing legal work. For example, we have things like client privilege, like certain things like that we have to take into consideration, like the way we store communications, the way we store and collect fees, the way we track our work. Whereas in a traditional sense, throughput is from the point something comes to the door to the point that it leaves our door. Within legal operations, we need to figure that out. Are we tracking time? How much time, attorneys are spending? Are we tracking how many cases they're touching? It's just, you have to really hone in on the legal part of that because it's really specific. And if you do it incorrectly, you can get in a lot of trouble. So, there are
Yes.
compliance things you have to be concerned about. So it's essentially you're operating in a legal space, but you have the same expectations of still being efficient, still managing operations, end-to-end throughput, things like that. So, and adding that legal layer does make things a bit more complex.
Yeah. So I want to delve in on that. At LegalZoom, you're running this high volume kind of business formation
Mhm.
operation. But at Rasa, the product is an individual's freedom in the end of the day.
Yes.
I guess I should say for those listening, Rasa is an expungement so,
Hmm.
startup, right? Yeah, helping people to expunge their records. Uh,
Yes.
and so you now have the product is this freedom. How do those two things work? Like, because I'm assuming that efficiency is not always, you really want to get everything correct on filing the paperwork, and so maybe you can kind of thread that needle for me.
Yeah, sure. So, whereas with LegalZoom, when you're forming businesses, you're dealing with the Secretary of State, right? You're using a prescribed form that they provide. You're working against their turnaround times. You know what their fees are. It's pretty cookie cutter for this. Really, really easy. With expungements, and this is something I actually had to learn kind of coming in. Like, you're not necessarily dealing with the state, you're dealing with the court, and you're dealing with the court in different counties, sometimes different cities. And each court has their own way of doing things. And that's what makes it very difficult as an operator to plan, right?
Every
To come up.
jurisdiction is different.
Yes, every jurisdiction is different. And because this work is so new, even encountered counties that don't even know the process. Like, I don't know what form this is. I've never seen this before. We've never had a request like that. So, like this before. So, we're having to kind of navigate that as well. But it's different, it's just a different situation being kind of like at the mercy of the Secretary of State versus being at the mercy of the courts. Because it's just a different audience. It's a different almost culture to a certain extent. You know, courts kind of operate on their own like timelines. You can't really do anything to get things escalated or expedited anyway. You're really at the mercy of the person who grabs your document or who happens to pick up the phone. So it's been really difficult trying to find a way to create processes or measure success, right? Because we just don't know. Like we know that one county, you know, we may be able to get this expungement done in 3 months, but we have another county where this document has been out for 9 months and we have no idea when it's going to come back. So trying to figure out those nuances from county to county, it has been a bit of a challenge. It has been.
Okay. Oh, but that's helpful to understand kind of what you're facing.
Given those two different scenarios, going from working with the company that streamlines legal work for businesses to now working for a company that has a service that, you know, every case touches different jurisdictions, really impacting people's lives. How does that change the operations side of things for you? Like, what's the difference? What are the differences there?
I don't think it necessarily changes the operation side because my goals are still my goals. My goals, you know, when I was hired was to come in, understand the process, and figure out a way to operationalize this as much as I possibly can given the circumstances, right? And that's still my goal. It's just that it isn't going to be 1 + 1 is 2. It may be 1 to the 2nd power divided by this plus this, you know, to kind of get to that end state. It may have a couple of steps in between that, but the goal is still a goal. I think that, you know, one of the biggest things when Noella hired me, she wants to scale and she wants to scale as quickly as possible. It is her goal to try to help as many people as we possibly can, right? And I'm all for it. But we have to kind of change how we do things operationally. Right now, you know, it's very law firm-ish, the way we operate. Attorneys are kind of like at the center of our fulfillment process. And in order for us to scale, we have to move to more of a fulfillment engine model. We can't focus on the attorneys. We have to focus on the work. That's how we measure how successful we are. And whereas, you know, at LegalZone, we were able to better manage like how many filings we're submitting per day, how long the state is taking to return those documents. We can still do that at Rasa, right? It just takes maybe a bit more work to kind of back into those numbers, but we can still totally get there.
This is really interesting because you're trying to design a repeatable process
Exactly.
across this multi-state legal patchwork, and then within each state you have local rules and things like that that apply in each county in every state. So how do you build, this may be an unanswerable question so far, but how do you build a process that's standardized enough to scale, but flexible enough to absorb the different legal regimes and local rules and all that?
Yeah. I mean, I think even with all the local nuances, an expungement is still an expungement, right? It's still going to start out with us collecting information from the client, us getting that information automated, a petition being submitted to the court at some point in time, the prosecutor having X amount of time to kind of review whether or not they want to approve or deny that, and then it moving along kind of through like that pipeline. Those steps are pretty consistent across every state. So my goal is to come in and figure out where are the similarities, what part of the process we can replicate in every single state and automate that part. So as much as we possibly can, and then solve kind of like for the nuances as they come along. So yeah, even with the state specific and county specific stuff, there's still areas of opportunity to kind of streamline because in the end, you know, every expungement set aside starts with a petition being completed and submitted somewhere. And we can automate all of that, like automate as much as we possibly can.
That's awesome that you're able to automate all that. I have one follow-up. You're making these repeatable processes, but are you noticing serving this different clientele, those who are coming in for maybe a once in a lifetime expungement versus business users who may be repeat users? Are you noticing is is the user journey or the user base, is that impacting any of your ability to do repeatable processes or to build out operations?
It's a great question. From my time with Rasa, and I've only been with the company for a couple of months now, I have not experienced that. I think whereas whereas LegalZoom was more of a person per document, it's very similar with Rasa where it's more of a case by case, right? So we kind of take it from like the individual level because an individual can come in with 5 or 6 different cases. And we have to handle those 5 or 6 different cases completely differently, depending on like what work needs to be done. So even with Rasa, it still kind of comes down to that case by case as
Uh-huh.
opposed to like the person by person, if that makes sense.
Oh, so because they may have cases in different counties or
Exactly. Or even different states. Like,
different
like they may
states.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just depends. And right now we're operating only in 3 states. But if someone comes through and they have a case in Utah and they have a case in Pennsylvania, those are going to be treated completely differently.
Yeah, they have. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that
Yeah.
does. That, oh, I didn't even think about that. That generally those who are going through some of these difficulties,
Hmm.
it's been a long time since I've been in a court, so who are going through these difficulties have had criminal or often mental
Hmm.
health with criminal related issues showing up, kind of following them wherever they went, right? And I
Yes.
didn't even think about how that complicates the user journey,
Yes.
or how you're addressing all of their cases and all of the different in the different jurisdictions. Wow, that really does add some
A layer of
situation
complexity.
layer
Yes.
of complexity. Yeah,
Yes.
because it really adds exponential issues there,
It does.
and I'm sure you're running into issues where you can do the expungement in Utah, but maybe you're not deployed in another state in which they have a case that they'd like to have expunged. Is that are you running into that as well? Like, boy, we'd
That
love to be
definitely.
in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely can happen. But what we do in those situations, we like to refer those out to like the legal aid companies that are in the state. Like anything that we can't do, we try to refer out. We just don't want to be a shut door, for anyone, even if it's a state that we don't operate in. If we can provide an additional resource, another
Yeah,
direction, or other path for that person, then we'll definitely do that.
that's great.
I'm going to pivot a little
Mhm.
bit. You were mentioning earlier in the conversation about measuring success and how there's a lot of additional nuances from the business operations side versus the legal operations
Mhm.
side. Can we dig a little deeper into what those metrics look like? What metrics do you use to measure success for a company that's mission based?
I like that.
That is a great question. I think that as an operator, it still comes down to how many people we are able to help. And that sounds very cookie cutter, but it is. Like in the end, and I look at it as operations is operations regardless of where you work. So you should be able to apply the same operational principles to Rasa versus LegalZoom versus Apple versus Amazon. Like operations is still operations. I would say that you do have to obviously take into account the client, the sensitivity, of the work. These are people that are coming to us because they want help. They are trying to do things like buy a house or get a job or be able to take their child on a field trip, things like that. So we always have that in the back of our mind when we're building out these processes. How can we make this go as smoothly as possible? How can we make this as quick as possible? So those things are still like top of mind, obviously, but in the end, operations are still operations, regardless of kind of like, the mission of the company. Like we still have work that needs to get done and it needs to get done as efficiently, as cheaply as we possibly can.
Yeah, so I guess that's a great question, Hannah. I was
It
uh
is.
so
It is.
efficiency metrics still apply. Uh
Yes.
the outcome is different, but how you're operating the business, how you're operating the legal side of the business, those efficiency metrics still remain.
Exactly. And I have to obviously, there are compliance considerations that we have to think about. I have an awesome business partner, Chase. He's our compliance attorney. So a lot of things like, hey, I want to do this in this state. Like, can we do this? Or
Yeah.
I want to remove attorneys from this part of the process. Do attorneys absolutely have to touch this? I absolutely have to look at this. So finding ways to still get the work done while staying compliant.
Yeah, Chase is amazing. He's a
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
Chase Hurdle
Link.
is, and he really knows all about this space.
Hmm.
Noella reminded me that you guys had picked him
Hmm.
up, and I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
he really knows what he's doing in this space. So,
And he
um,
gets it. It's so
yeah,
refreshing as an operator to have an attorney that gets it because it's because I've been on the other side. I've been, I want to we're trying to get things done and just, oh, I really don't know if we can do that, but Chase is like, let's figure out how to do it. I'm not going to say
that's
no.
nice.
Let's figure out how we can do it. And if it comes back, like we just can't legally do it, then we can't, but it isn't an immediate no. Like he'll try to figure it out.
That's nice. That's an attorney who isn't being stopped by risk averseness. They are
Exactly.
trying to find a solution, and
Exactly.
that's not common in my experience. Usually they're trying to avoid anything that may get you in
Hmm.
trouble rather than trying to make the business work. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. How do you sequence well, first of all, how many states are you guys in now? Is Rasa in?
In
How
three
many
states
states?
right now.
It serves
So,
three states. Okay.
mhm.
So how do you sequence like a new state launch operationally? What is that like?
And it's so great that you mentioned that because we're actually in process of that right now.
I don't want you to give us anything proprietary, but just kind of like what does that look like internally for you guys?
Well, I think it's a new process for all of us because we have a new executive team. Noella did a great job bringing on a great group of folks. So whereas in the past this was something that was really left to Noella to do on her own, like Noella had to do a ton of the lifting here. She's been able to delegate a good chunk of the work to everybody in their own specific field. So, for example, for me, what I've noticed is that, when we rolled out with the new state, we're still kind of learning the state after it rolls out. We're just trying to like things kind of pop up. We really didn't realize that was the case. So we have to kind of go back and, change things to kind of fix it. And that happens. We're a startup. It's going to happen,
Yeah.
but as an operator, I want to try to get ahead of everything as much as I possibly can. So we can solve for the nuances prior to launch and operate like that 80% of what we can, automate and then solve for the 20% that we can't. So from my perspective as operations, I'm going into the counties. I'm figuring out each county level process. What tools are they using to actually do the expungements? Is it automated? Is it online? Do these steps require an actual attorney to do, or is this something we can kind of delegate to another person or even a machine if possible? How are we going to tie in communication to the client? How are we keeping the client in the loop on, like, how their request is moving through the pipeline? What are the fees? How are we paying the fees?
I see.
What's the turnaround time at the state level? How do we build that out to measure throughput? What do we do if something gets stuck somewhere? So my job is to going into this, map everything end to end from the point we get the request to the point that request goes out the door to the client. What does that process look like? And then now that we have it, we're going to back into tech goes here, human goes here, this tool goes here, this fee goes here, so that when we actually go live, we know exactly what we're doing and there are no more like post-launch surprises.
Okay, I got to follow up on that, Hannah. I'm
Mhm.
sorry if I'm jumping past you, but
Oh, go ahead.
how do you map it all out when you go county? Are you using like Figma or Adobe, like just for your own? What
Yes.
tools are you using to make this? Because going county by county, and like, for example, California, where we've got 58 or 59 counties, like, how are you keeping track of all of this as an operator?
So I use a couple of tools. First and foremost, I refer
Okay.
to Claude as my homeboy. He helps keep me organized. He keeps me in order. He helps me with a lot of the initial research. Like for this specific state that we're working on, I had him go out and say, "Hey, how many counties are there in the state? And what are the contact information for these county so I can just proactively make the phone calls. So I didn't have to research each county state by state. And how I'm keeping all of that organized, ClickUp. I don't think people understand the magic of ClickUp. ClickUp is
I don't.
it is an amazing tool. Like, and they recently added an AI agent functionality, which helps me so much. When I was on the LegalZoom side, I dabbled in government affairs for a bit. And ClickUp, I basically created an agent where ClickUp will go scan my email for new legislation and populate it into this table and then notify the attorneys that the legislation was in place, and they go in and review the legislation to determine whether or not it was something that we need to kind of like check. And with ClickUp, it's the same thing. Like these are this is everything that I'm working on. This is how I need to prioritize it. Like kind of like go build my day. Remind me when I need to follow up on this. Remind me, like, create a calendar when I need to call this person. So I think between Claude and ClickUp, those things have been magical, like literally magical.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then I guess not having used the service, would you then build out a intake flow for that county basically on your site? Is that, or maybe you don't do that, but the designers, or
Yes.
once once you've mapped all that out, then I'm sure that the designers would then build it for somebody who's asking specifically for San Joaquin County in California. Is that right?
Correct. Correct. The
Okay.
way that works. So yeah, we have a team, our marketing team and our tech team. They basically work with different vendors to collect court information, so that
Mhm.
when the client goes to our app and they kind of run their record, where they're able to see if they qualify, we have all that court data built into our eligibility tool. And then they're able to see if they qualify. And once that happens, they kind of come through the pipeline, and we do all the back end work at that point.
Yeah. Sorry, Hannah. I know I stepped over you there, but I
That's okay.
started nerding out on how the workflow went. So
As you guys
yeah,
should.
you're
All right. So, Cheyenne, do you have any advice on trying to scale a service business without breaking the quality that made it work?
Yes. Okay, that's a great question. And that was my biggest thing, because this has happened to me a lot in my just day-to-day like work. You hire a new person, they come on board and they just want to change the world. And for me, coming from LegalZone, the big corporate company now, and Rasa, a very small startup, I know what it's like to be in Rasa, like the employee shoes. Like someone comes in and you think that you've built like this great thing and you've made it work. And then someone kind of comes in from the outside and just tears everything down. Oh, why are you doing it this way? Or this is horrible. You shouldn't be doing this way. So my thing, my first 30 days I spent essentially understanding the process. I look at it as Rasa has done a tremendous amount of work with the processes and the people that they have in place. And that is for a reason. So it is not my place to kind of come in and just try to tear everything down without really fully understanding the why. Like, why are we doing things this way? Because there's a reason. Like, people just don't do things randomly. There's a reason why this specific process is in place. There's a reason why this specific person is doing this, why we're using this specific tool. So, when you're coming on board and you're wanting to build out the process, understand why the process exists as it does right now. And then once you figure that out, you have a better understanding of why things are the way they are. And then from that, you can say, okay, this is a problem you were trying to fix and it has worked, but let's figure out how we can make this more efficient or make this easier for you or make this faster for you, as opposed to coming in and just breaking everything down without having full knowledge of how things work. And you end up actually making things worse, So that will be my advice, get a full understanding of the process, of the people, why things are being done the way they are being done, and then take your experience and your knowledge and figure out how to make that even better for that group.
Wonderful, wonderful suggestions. I want to, you know what, I'm not sure we touched on this at the top. So you went from corporate to a
Mhm.
small startup. What made you make that jump? This would be a more personal
Yeah.
approach. Did you, was it just time for a change, or did you like the idea of going to a mission driven organization,
Mhm.
or what really did it for you?
Noella is what did it for me. Honestly, I mean, you've spoken to her, so you know.
Yep, I
So
know.
she's an amazing human with an amazing heart, with an amazing mission, right?
Yep.
And, you know, that was part of the allure for me for LegalZoom. It's that although I sat in a specific team, the work that I did helped others. So, like from a legal, you know, from a business formation side, it was so refreshing or just so rewarding when you form a business and a year later, like that person comes in and like, look what you helped me do, or a cookie company sends you a box of cookies from their new bakery, like that type of like it's just so rewarding, you know. So having Noella come in and just explain who she is and what she's trying to do and why she's trying to do it, it just touched like every desire in me to want to help as many people that I possibly could. And while it was a tough decision for me to leave LegalZone because, you know, I was with the company for over 21 years, it was almost like a divorce to a certain extent.
Sure.
Yeah, but I absolutely could not pass up this opportunity because I want to be of service. At the end of the day, you know, I want to try to help as many people as I possibly can in any way I possibly can. And I feel like Rasa and its mission will allow me to do that. And I knew that I was going to be working for a CEO who had that top of mind. That is her goal, to try to help as many people as possible. And it's just so refreshing, like moving from kind of like that corporate kind of environment to somewhere where it's more mission driven. So it's not about, you know, the numbers and the board and this and that and that. It's like, how many people can we help? How can we help, you know, people more quickly? How can we scale to more states so we can help more people? So it just makes me feel great knowing that I am a part of someone's journey to help improve their lives.
That's a fantastic question, or fantastic answer. Excuse me. That is, yeah, Noelle will be on the show eventually, Hannah. So,
It's amazing.
but she heeded the call that we were looking for others who hadn't had as much visibility in this industry, who are still doing a lot of work. So
Hmm.
she recommended you for that. So you came highly recommended,
Thank you.
and that's why I persisted with trying to touch base by LinkedIn and emails. And I was like, I really want to get you on here because Noella recommended you.
Based on your compelling experience in the legal tech space, do you have any advice for the legal tech operators?
Great question. I would say never make a knee jerk decision. Never make a knee jerk decision. And I think as operators, because we want to move very quickly and we want to do as much as we possibly can, we have the tendency to not always sit back and understand like the full picture. And it's real easy to become very focused on a singular problem, but you need to see the entire thing. Like, you know, so you may fix that one problem, but then that ends up breaking something else kind of like down the line. So take the time to really understand before you make any changes. Talk to people who are on the ground. I think that's extremely valuable because as like if you're not doing the work, it's really difficult for you to really understand. I mean, you see the process on paper. Yeah, you can say this doesn't make sense or we can do this better, but let's talk to the people, talk to them and really get their points of views, their understanding on why things are done. Because I think that helps you make a better informed decision. And then you get their buy-in as well. So when change eventually does come, it isn't as difficult, like because they feel like they were part of the process.
Like that.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's fun
people are just as important as process, if not more important.
in the process in this situation is, it may not make sense on paper, but that may be the way this court
Mhm.
does it, right? Like,
Exactly.
so, like, and you're kind of stuck with how this court in some distant place,
Rural place. Yeah.
rural
Yeah.
place does something really strange.
Yes.
And so it doesn't make sense, but you cannot avoid that. That's
You can't. Exactly.
not uncommon. So
Yeah.
we're just about to wrap up, but let you have your day back. Any recommendations? We don't normally do legal operations. Any people that you think we should talk to in legal operations, because it is a huge section of the legal field now, and huge in-house in corporate law departments and things like that. So
Mhm.
anybody you recommend that we should be touching base with in legal technology or legal operations side of things?
Well, that's a great question. Chase, obviously, if you haven't
Okay.
already touched base with him, Chase would be great. There's also James Peters. So he was my boss at LegalZone when I was on the law firm side. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant attorney, but he's also an attorney that gets it, understands the importance of like technology and law and how those two things kind of merge. I think he would be great for this. What do you think?
That's pretty good. We haven't done a legal Zoom episode. That would be worthwhile to reach out to James Peters. That's a
Yeah.
good suggestion.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
isn't at LegalZoom anymore, but
that's okay.
yeah, but he started out as one of the early attorneys. Well, LegalZoom was still pretty young, but like yeah, he's an amazing, very smart, very very smart.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Cheyenne, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Legal Tech Live. Where would our listeners, our viewers, find you? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn will
Is that
probably be the best. Yeah,
best?
I'm not on social media too much, but if you need to reach me, I pop in and out of LinkedIn every so often. So
Excellent. So we'll put that in the
yeah,
show notes.
yes,
It was great meeting you. Thank you for just sharing your experience with us. Like I said before we even started recording, I don't know much about legal operations, so it's been great just learning from you.
thank you, and thank you both for having me on board and making this such an easy conversation. I appreciate you both.
Our pleasure.